distinguished guest, friend, I have many friends here, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure and honor to be here today in the fourth Global Entrepreneurship and Innovation Conference. When we started a few years back, we were not sure that we will have the second one because the first one should be successful in order to have the second one. And the second one was successful in GEIC University. The third one is successful, Ben-Gurion University. And we are now in the fourth one, and I'm thanking Nankai University and Professor Yuli Zhang for organizing it. And I'm sure it will be successful. I've seen some of the papers that were submitted. Extremely interesting conference. I will concentrate in my talk on interesting question that is not only interesting in China, but there are quite few outside China that are considering this question. And the question is China becoming the new Silicon Valley? It was referenced here a few times. I will address the question by going from global high-level development in China, focusing into some topics that are relevant to the question, and will give some insight on how I look at it. Starting with China and the world, or China in the world in 2017. By the way, this was the title of a conference I organized in Amsterdam together with the Confucius Institute. So 2017 is very interesting and important year for China and therefore for the world. For the first time in history, the G20 was hosted by China in September in Hangzhou. And if you read the summary document of the G20, you will find much of the element of China's 5-year plan in the strategy of the G20. So by hosting the G20, China actually included its 5-year plan strategy into world agenda. You will read the new industrial revolution, digital life, innovation-based economy. So this was the first thing that happened in 2017. And then later, there was the World Economic Forum in Davos. Again, historical moment because this was the first time that the Chinese president attended the forum. Previously, there were prime ministers from China, first time the president. And he became the celebrity of this forum because he was portrayed and he was described as the one who is progressing and protecting globalization, the opposite that was happening in the States. And of course, not to forget the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is quite a challenge for the IMF, and the Road and Belt Program. All these developments are changing China and progressing China dramatically, and therefore are changing the world. If we are looking at technology in China, and these are just few anecdotal examples, you could fill this slide with many other, but just to give an indication and a feeling on where China's technology is today. Just a few weeks ago, the first flight of the first commercial airplane was happening in China. I think within 5 to 10 years, Airbus and Boeing will have much less business in China than they have today. China developed an impressive space technology. There are space missions. There is a lot of technology developed in the space area in China. And for me, one of the most impressive technologies, of course, is the fast train technology. Going from a situation and time where there were no fast trains in China into leading position globally is quite impressive. Today, China, I believe, is number 2 in developing and supplying fast train in the world. I read somewhere, I think 6 months ago, that China is participating in the tender to supply fast train rail to California. If you would say this 30 years ago, everybody would laugh at you. So there is quite some technology development in China. Looking at Chinese companies, Some of them are known globally. Some of them are leaders in China. In all areas, many technology companies, many technology products. By the way, not only technology. One of our partners in the Netherlands who work with us on developing some programs is ICBC. ICBC today is the bank that has the highest brand recognition among banks in the world. Again, something that was unthinkable a few years ago. Looking at digital life in China, what was mentioned here many times, this is 1 minute of digital life in China. Internet payment, mobile payment, in 1 minute, more than 50 million yuan are being transacted. And if you look at the numbers, again, digital life in China, in many perspectives, is more than we see in the Western world. Online payment, etc. All these previous 3 slides are not less than impressive. And I think the Chinese people and the Chinese nation can and should be very proud in these achievements. But, when looking at global ranking of innovation, China is not in the first 10 countries, is not in the first 20 countries. And then you have to ask the question why. With all this impressive progress in all areas, it's not yet in the position it aimed to be. And my answer to it is, and I think Chaim Dotan will agree to the notion of ecosystem. My answer is that ecosystem for innovation and entrepreneurship is everything. The ecosystem is everything. And what is successful ecosystem for entrepreneurship and innovation? It's not only the one that generates innovative startups. This is happening in China quite often. Successful ecosystem is one that is capable of transforming and recreating itself time and again, and thereby creating new industries and new sectors and not only new startups. And this notion of ecosystem that creates itself is just like stem cells. And we are sitting here in a conference in a business school, entrepreneurship, innovation, business, stem cell. We are not sitting in a conference in biology, so how come stem cell? And I would like to put forward to you a metaphor I'm using for a successful ecosystem. Because we are interested not in ecosystem as such, not in something that is called silicon, whatever, but in successful ecosystems. And the metaphor I use for successful ecosystem is stem cell. Stem cells are very unique, interesting cell in human body. These are generic cells that have 2 interesting characteristics. One, they can duplicate themselves. So stem cell can create new stem cell. But the most interesting characteristic is that stem cell can become any other kind of cell. So stem cell can become a kidney cell, can become a muscle cell, can become a nerve cell, any cell in the human body. So they can duplicate themselves and they can specialize to become any other cell. To make it and to link it to ecosystem, I will give you now a short overview of 2 stem cell ecosystems, and then I will discuss the question of if China is becoming the new Silicon Valley. And the first one, just to bring something that is used quite often, Silicon Valley. Looking at the timeline of Silicon Valley, some of you may not know, but when Silicon Valley started, it was an ecosystem for semiconductor companies. So the initial wave of startup in Silicon Valley were semiconductor companies. Intel was then a very young startup. AMD and many other companies that are today global leading company. When this industry, startup became mature, Silicon Valley transformed itself into PC and network ecosystem. So they generated all these PC companies and network companies. And then it transformed itself again into software, and then into internet and e-commerce and mobile phones, social network, self-driving car. What will happen in 2020? Nobody knows. There are two interesting observations to make here. One, none of this transformation is planned. Nobody planned for Silicon Valley to go from one to the other. And the second observation is that it started with defense and military technology. Two observations. Now to the second stem cell ecosystem that I think and I believe is much more interesting and relevant for China. And this is Israel, which is ranked as #2 top startup ecosystem around the globe. Looking at the same picture, started in the 1960s with software. When all software companies became large and mature, it transformed itself into telecom and networks, and then into semiconductor, and then into mobile technology, cyber, agri-tech, biomedical, and today, self-driving car technologies. What will happen in 2020? Nobody knows. But the ecosystem, like every stem cell ecosystem, which is a successful ecosystem, it will transform itself into creating and generating new industries, new sector that will generate new innovative startups. Now, going into the last transformation of self-driving car technologies, what happened is, and this is extremely interesting and really a textbook example of stem cell ecosystem, a successful ecosystem. Israel has become, with the last transformation, a global hub for self-driving car technologies. And the funny thing about it is that Israel had never had car manufacturing industry. There is no car manufacturing or any car-related industry in Israel. Never has been. Yet, the ecosystem, because of the stem cell capability, transformed itself into self-driving car, and today there are more than 100 startups that are developing unique self-driving car technologies, and all large car manufacturers today are operating in Israel, be it BMW, Audi, Mercedes, Volkswagen, all of them are coming to Israel. They are either buying companies or setting research center. And again, this country had never had car industry. The latest example that this is happening, because of course it can be nice propaganda, this was the latest example that makes it very specific. Mobileye, one of the first self-driving car technologies that has algorithm for computer vision and managing sensors, was taken over by Intel for $50.3 billion. Why? Because Intel moves into self-driving car industry, and they need unique technology. So they took over this company. Coming back to my proposition, which is ecosystem is everything. And successful ecosystem is one that is able to transform itself, recreate itself, thereby creating new industries, new sectors, and innovative startups. It just happened that the new transformation of the ecosystem in Israel is self-driving car technology. And this is only possible if you create a stem cell ecosystem. Ecosystem that can transform itself into new sectors, new industries, and then generate startup. Only generating startup is not sufficient. You will get stuck and you will get lost. You will have to create an ecosystem that generating new industry, transforming itself, recreating itself. Coming back to China, and I'm somewhat more critical and less optimistic for compared to the previous speakers. Is China becoming Silicon Valley? Some think China is already Silicon Valley. Some think that China is beyond Silicon Valley. Some do not know, and there are some that think it's not yet there. So before answering the question, it is clear that China is moving towards innovation-based economy. It is part of the 5-year plan, mass entrepreneurship and innovation. It is even part of the G20 agenda. There are some issues and challenges. The Chinese president identified science and technology as one of the bottlenecks. My view is that this is less of a serious and less of a challenge. This can happen. Science and technology can happen. What did not happen yet, and is a real challenge for China, is the fact that China has not yet developed a stem cell ecosystem. There are many, many ecosystems in China, many, many entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystems in China. And last one that I've seen was in Chengdu. Very impressive, large amount of startup, but it is not a stem cell ecosystem. So China's ecosystem today is moving from made in China into designed in China, and it excels in taking the existing and making it better, faster, cheaper, and so on. It's not yet stem cell ecosystem that can recreate, transform itself. Once this is happening, then it will be interesting to ask the question, is China becoming Silicon Valley? And on my last note, China does not have to become Silicon Valley. If you look at the 2 example ecosystems that I presented here, the Israeli ecosystem is much more interesting, relevant, and applicable to China than Silicon Valley. As Chaim Dotan mentioned, there are many, many similarities between Israel, the Jewish people, and China. It is the value system, family, education, and so on and so forth. So I just had this, I would like to answer the question, can China develop stem cell ecosystem and how? But someone there showed me the time sign, so unfortunately I will leave you in suspense on the answer, but I will be more than happy to discuss it in different form, different session. Thank you.